Okay guys, I don't want to say that this new Warlock build is a bit broken, because if I do, it's probably going to get nerfed to the ground, because when you can spend more time being in a super than not being in a super, you know it's busted. But you know what, this Reddit post is kinda right. We're definitely not getting supers too fast, not generating too many Ionic Traces, and not getting much super energy from those Ionic Traces, right? I mean, let's just pretend that's the case at least. And I know this will 100% get nerfed eventually. Builds like this, they always just get nerfed to the ground, but it is what it is. But I am glad that Chaos Reach and Geomags finally have a build that we can actually use in in-game content again, because it's been a really long time coming. But today we are going to be using both the Geomag combined with the Vault Shot perks, and yes, while you can go wild with the Delicate Tomb to create a ton of Ionic Traces and get supers within literally seconds, I decided to go the route of using weapons with Vault Shot, because it basically does the exact same thing, except you just need to reload more often, whereas with Delicate Tomb, you can just shoot, and you're just going to flood the room with Ionic Traces. It does use special ammo, but what a surprise guys, we have a Dreadful Finisher artifact perk that spawns special ammo on powerful finishers, so it's basically infinite ammo in in-game content when you got a lot of powerful enemies, and those powerful enemies are going to give you even more energy as well, so it's a double win. Since Ionic Traces are the main part of the build, we want to maximise our production of them, so if you want the complete best result, Delicate Tomb will do the job for you, but there are other options like using Vault Shot perks, which does the same job but just at a slower rate. Honestly guys, this build is insane, and with the new artifact perks, and probably more to come in Act 2 and 3, it's only going to get more lethal. So if you like this one, then be sure to leave a rating, comment, subscribe and share for more, and now let's charge up that Chaos Reach. Roll the intro. Now before we jump into the build video, like every video, I will first mention that the full playlist of new and updated builds are down below if you want to see more videos like this, so go check it out when you get a sec because you might just find your new best build in there. But with this one today, we do have an overpowered Chaos Reach with Geomag build that allows you to get supers almost, I'd say instantly, but let's just say around 10 to 20 seconds if you use Delicate Tomb, or around 30 to 60 seconds if you just go about your day using any arc weapon or weapons with Vault Shot when combined with the setup that we're using. This build does work better in end game content and also activities where there are a lot of enemies around, so the more enemies that you kill, the faster you'll get your super. But we're not only benefiting from the faster supers, we will also get our abilities back faster, and we'll be taking advantage of the brand new bolt charge system along with the new Ionic Sentry Arc Aspect for the Warlock. It's worth bearing in mind that Geomags did get a bit of a rework, so it now has a new perk where sprinting while near max static charge will top it off. This is basically referring to the bolt charges, but also the super energy gained from Ionic Traces have been increased from 2% up to 7%. So the fact that we're now making more Ionic Traces and they also got buffed just makes this build stupidly OP, and if that wasn't enough buffs, well, Chaos Reach itself also got buffed by 15% too, so it's even stronger now than it's ever been before. Now basically the most easiest and simple way that you'll use this build is you'll just throw on a Delicate Tomb fusion rifle and kill enemies with it, and that'll give you a super almost instantly. The stronger the enemy is that you kill, the more energy that you'll get, so it does work better in harder content. But if you're just going to go the more casual and relaxed way, where you're not restricted to using a specific exotic weapon, then using a weapon with Vault Shot will do the exact same trick but at a slower pace. I would recommend taking advantage of the Ionic Sentry since it does blind enemies, including yourself if you throw it on your feet, but that along with the setup that we have in place will give us more Ionic Traces, as well as more bolt charge stacks, and it's just going to keep the entire gameplay loop consistent throughout whatever activity that you're going to be playing. Since our main goal of the build is to get Chaos Reach supers as fast as possible, make sure that you firstly have a Chaos Reach on in the Arc subclass, but we will be using the buffed Geomag Stabilizers Exotic armor, because what this now does is damaging targets with Chaos Reach extends its duration, but collecting Ionic Traces now grants up to 7% super energy for Chaos Reach, and while sprinting near max bolt charge stacks, you'll get more stacks over time. Quite a strong buff if I'm being honest, but those bolt charges are new. So bolt charges at a 10 times stack will shoot out a lightning attack when you use an arc ability, so it just helps chain more lightning to enemies. We will use the new Ionic Sentry Aspect, since defeating targets with arc weapons and abilities will charge up an arc turret that periodically chains lightning and also grants bolt charge stacks with each hit. You just throw this down like you would with a grenade, but it doesn't actually consume the grenade itself, which is also nice. The second aspect we'll combine this with is the Electrostatic Mind, so defeating targets with arc abilities or defeating jolted or blinded targets creates an Ionic Trace, and collecting Ionic Traces makes you amplified, amplified. So since we'll be generating almost infinite Ionic Traces, it just means we'll always be amplified, which will just be beneficial for some artifact perks that we're using this episode. For fragments, we have Spark of Discharge, so that arc weapon final blows have a chance to create an Ionic Trace. That just means that sometimes we'll generate 2 Ionic Traces from 1 kill, and those Ionic Traces will also give us Bolt Charge stacks, as well as ability energy. The second fragment is Spark of Ions, so defeating a jolted target creates an Ionic Trace. Since Delicate Tomb already creates Ionic Traces, and also jolts enemies, that gives us a chance to generate 2 traces from 1 kill, if you are using that weapon, since when you initially collect an Ionic Trace, the next shot you shoot out will jolt an enemy, and because we're killing that jolted enemy, it creates another Ionic Trace, and the cycle just repeats, which makes Delicate Tomb a great exotic weapon to use with this build. Vault Shot on weapons essentially does the same thing. You kill an enemy, reload, and then you're jolting the next target. So if you don't use Delicate Tomb, any weapon, including craftable weapons that have Vault Shot, will work just fine with this build as well. So that is there as an alternative option for you guys. Back in the fragments for the third one, we have Spark of Resistance, so that while surrounded we are more resistant to incoming damage. Then the last one is just Spark of Shock, so that our arc grenades jolt targets, just as another source to jolt enemies and create more Ionic Traces. Since Ionic Traces gives us ability energy, and we're also making a ton of them, it's essentially infinite abilities, and that makes our grenade our primary source to stun overload champions. For the artifact perks, we are going to use the new Overclock and Load, so that while we're amplified or have bolt charges, arc weapons have increased reload speed. With this we'll use this one, so defeating arc debuff targets grant bolt charge stacks, and if you boost this perk, you will spawn orbs of power as well. The next one we're using is the Photonic Flare, so that our arc damage releases a blinding burst when defeating an exhausted target with arc damage. Dreadful Finisher, so that we get basically infinite special ammo for Delicate Tomb when finishing powerful adds in harder content. Flashover, which doesn't really make much of a difference since we'll always be amplified anyway, but it just makes the lightning bolts deal a bit more damage, which I guess might be good for some harder activities. And then if you have any extra points, you can just slot on this one to give us bolt charges when stunning champions, but to be honest it doesn't really matter, so you can choose any perks in this last set. For mods, you can use whatever you want really, they don't make much of a difference, since our exotic and subclass are doing all the stuff for us, but you can go for cooldown mods if you want to just reduce the downtime of your abilities even more, but honestly I don't think it's really needed, so just use whatever you prefer. This build does do a great job in all activities in the game. It might get disabled for day 1 dungeon if you're watching this before the dungeon goes live tomorrow, since it is kind of a busted build right now, which might allow you to put off a ton of DPS if you constantly have ads flooding the room, but overall a great build to use this season, and one that I strongly recommend you guys set up as your top few builds for episode Heresy in Destiny 2 currently. I will have a dim link and Mobilitix written guide down below if you do want to check that out to easily set up the build and understand how the gameplay loop works, so check out that next, or check out the playlist for more builds like this one if you found it useful, and whatever you guys get up to, have a good one, and I'll see you over in that next build video soon. Take care guys.